Hello and good day. Today is Thursday. It is March the 4th. It is the first day of our new unit on the early Middle Ages. We have two units that will cover the Middle Ages, and we'll take a test over each one. In the first one, aside from many of the things we'll study, first one we're going to focus on the construction uh, and construction and the evolution of castles. This, by the way, better picture. This, by the way, is Conway Castle, which is located in Wales. Technically it's part of the UK, but it's in Wales, which is in the southwestern corner of what we now call the UK. And it's a fairly well preserved castle. There on the other side of this castle, by the way, is a water inlet. And we'll talk about the construction of these castles more later on. This thing here, if you're wondering, uh, that's a cute little place where the locals would go lawn bowling. What is lawn bowling? Lawn bowling is kind of a combination of bowling uh, and billiards, pool, and knockout, where the goal is for you have two teams. But yeah, we came upon and we sat around and watched these guys play for about 20 minutes. To be real honest, this castle, I visited two big castles when I was in the UK in 2013. And this one, I did not pay the entrance fee and did not go in. We had been into what I thought was a better castle the day before, and I think I was right. And we'll look at that castle as well. That was Carnarvon Castle. This is Conway, spelled Conwy, Conway Castle. Both of which, however, in Wales. The castles were built by the English king. I believe it was Edward II. King Edward II, to solidify his control over the Welsh countryside. Yeah, the Welsh did not like him being there. But anyway, and so let's get back to this. Let's talk about the early Middle Ages, shall we? Now, throughout history, as time has elapsed, it has always been a constant fact that the level of man's culture and understanding, pursuit of knowledge, have also progressed normally. In the post-Roman world, the Roman Empire is gone now. In Western Europe, that was really not the case. There were many things, as it says there, about the Romans who ruled Europe for 6 centuries that were really undesirable. I mean, they were, once again, there's that word, they were an hedonistic people. They amused themselves, hedonistic, they had sex with everything that moved. They amused themselves with acts of violence, the gladiatorial games, chariot races, bawdy stage productions. They were heavy-handed and cruel. Remember that they were the ones who not only did they crucify Jesus, but when Jesus was born, the story of the murder of the innocents, where they went around in order to find Jesus, they killed every male child under the age of 2. Heavy-handed. However, the Roman world was a civilization that to this very day has been again and again unsuccessfully copied. I mean, people did try to copy the Roman Empire. The Romans built roads. And as it says there, did you know that a person could travel faster during the days of the Pax Romana than at any point in time until the invention of the locomotive? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could. Why? Because the Romans had these great roads. And these roads were secure. They were patrolled by Roman legions. And yes, they had water systems. They had water ran to all the major cities, public works, public toilets, libraries, hospitals, and above all, they kept peace. However, when the Roman Empire died, all those things went away as well. I always like to tell my students that, and nobody watches Walking Dead anymore, I guess. That's a series that's kind of Walking Dead, if you'll pardon the pun. But if you have any idea what The Walking Dead is about, and yeah, The Walking Dead is about, as you know, this apocalyptic world where for some reason suddenly all people who are dead come back to life as walkers or zombies or deadheads or whatever they call them, whose one and ultimate goal is to eat you. And so because of that great apocalypse, all human institutions fall apart. Human institutions like, well, the law, human institutions like, roads, human institutions like electricity, they all fall apart. And what you have left then, to be honest, is the Middle Ages. So when the Roman Empire died, these amenities died as well. There were no institutions that could replace the Roman Empire and what it did for the populace. Roman law and order were replaced by feudalism, a word we're going to learn about later on. And Roman prosperity and trade were replaced by the manorial system, another word we'll learn about. Feudalism is a way to rule people. And the manorial system a way to manage resources. The population of Western Europe for the first time in human history actually declined. Cities were abandoned in favor of the manorial farms, where the great majority of human beings eked out a dismal existence in cold, hunger, and with the threat of violence, a literal reality every day. The search for knowledge became replaced by suspicion and superstition and religious zealotry. The skills of reading and writing were looked upon as useless and were soon practiced only in the religious professions. Religion then became the all-consuming, passion of the masses as they saw it. The only way to a better life. And as it says there, the Roman Catholic Church held the keys to heaven. So doing anything outside the goodwill of that church was literally considered unthinkable. But before we go into that today, I've just got a few pictures to show you that I found interesting dealing with castles. Now, like I said before, this is Conway Castle. Now, this next castle I'm going to show you, well, two. Now, the earliest type castles were rather simple fortifications. They were called motte and bailey fortifications. So you say, what's a motte and bailey? Well, a motte is a building that they would erect on the crest of a hill. Now, this one is pretty advanced. The oldest motte, there are no remaining oldest castles anymore because the oldest castles were actually wooden stockades. They're made of wood, but they were like this. Here you have a hill, and this is the motte, which sits on top of the hill. And then surrounding the hill would be an open space called a bailey that they'd build a wall to surround this space. But this is the motte and bailey. This, by the way, is in York, England. Now, did all castles look like that? Did all have the main building in the center? No. In fact, look at this one. This one, darn it, this one, if you notice this castle, this is the main building of this castle. And I found this castle, it's close to Manchester, England. I forget the name of it. It had a strange name, so I didn't try to remember it too much. But the main building here, notice it's inserted in the wall. It's part of the wall. And this wall went around, quite some ways here, but this is where the primary building. Notice a couple of things. Now, if you notice, they have a stone walkway built up here, but to get from this walkway into the main building, you had to cross this parapet, which here has stairs, but they made it so that this footbridge could be easily just dropped. And so getting into the castle, up to the castle, could be pretty tricky. I mean, castles were built as a series of ringed perimeters, whereas if the outer ring fell, then the inner ring would be harder to get through. And the innermost ring was the main building here, called the keep. So, but notice here what we have here. This one, and I visited this, and this one had 3 levels. Down here, let's blow it up, shall we? This is the storage room here. They would store, foodstuffs, things of that nature that they needed down here. The water was sometimes, if they had a well, it was dug in here. Okay. Now, on the second floor, this is called the Great Hall, where notice they have a big fireplace here. Those castles were cold, dank. They were not comfortable, by the way. This was the Great Hall, where the lord of the manor would meet with his soldiers, his knights, whatever. They would have all official gatherings in here. And now up here, and by the way, the soldiers would sleep over here. See that building? Last, of course, they were under siege. Now up here, this is the dwelling place of the Lord himself. And there are all other kind of neat things in here. Up here, now here, this is the business end of the castle. Here, this roof, by the way, this slanted roof was meant to catch rain. The rain would fall in or run down, and because it does, in Northern Europe, you can depend on rain supplying you with enough drinking water if you need it. Although drinking the water in the castle was never a good idea, because it was held in vats that would pretty soon be infested with vermin, and drinking it was not a good idea. And so you drank grog, beer, wine if you had it. But yeah, the water they needed for things like cooking and washing, it would run down this roof into what is called a cistern. Now, of course, these things here, these are merlongs, openings cut into the side of the castle so that they could fire projectiles out of here on an enemy. Now, that's part of it. One more thing. These are called arrow loops. In other words, the archer would stand where we are, and he could then poke his his arrow outside through here, and basically could fire at everything within his field of vision and not expose himself to his enemy's fire. Clever. And castles had these all over the walls. So yeah, let's push on. Let's get back to the subject at hand, shall we? We'll see more pictures of castles tomorrow, I promise. All right, so after the fall of the Roman Empire, the first great ruler of Western Europe was a chieftain. His name, Carolus Magnus, which is Latin, Karl der Grosse, which is German, or Charles the Great, which is English, or in the traditional French, Charlemagne. Yeah. Fact. I have a picture of Charlemagne, don't I? Don't I? Oh, Mr. Horton, don't you have a picture of Charlemagne? I have a picture of Charlemagne. And let's bring that up here. Picture, I know I do. Look under C. If I have it, it's at home. Yeah, I will have to get that. Oh, there it is. And I was sad. I thought I had that thing here. This is Charlemagne. And this statue is right outside Notre Dame Cathedral. But yes, that's Charlemagne, the great ruler of the Frankish Empire and wicked man with a beard. So yes, thank you for reminding me of that. Anyway, Charlemagne, he was the leader of a Germanic tribe whose descendants today populate France, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and Luxembourg. Yeah. Charlemagne's empire was the last strong kingdom to hold sway in Western Europe until the late Middle Ages. Charlemagne's empire would attempt to combine the warlike vigor of his Germanic ancestors because, the Franks were this Germanic tribe of barbarians that invaded the Roman Empire at one time, settled down there in France. Of his Germanic ancestors, the civilization and culture of classic Roman Empire, and the calming influences of the Roman Catholic Church. Charlemagne was crowned as Emperor of the Franks by the Pope in Rome on Christmas Day in the year 800 AD. The crowning signified not only a unity between church and state, but given the fact that the Pope can place the crown on the monarch's head, that also infers that the Pope can take the crown off his head, telling you that of the two, church and state, in 800 AD, the church was the more powerful. His rule was known as the Carolingian Renaissance because for a short while, Charlemagne's empire did revive the scholarship and desire for learning that had hallmarked both Greek and Roman civilizations. Charlemagne's empire saw not only the reproduction of written works, but also the creation of new ones. There was an interest in painted arts and tapestries. What is a tapestry? A tapestry is a picture that is sewn into a large cloth. Yes, there are many tapestries, which we'll actually look at one later on. The most influential intellectual in Charlemagne's court was Alcuin of York. Alcuin of York was the personal tutor to Charlemagne and his family. He taught heavily from St. Augustine of Hippo's, City of God. Charlemagne at one point ordered all bishops to create schools for boys, which was a short-lived experiment in universal education. Ah, yes, Western names. How did Western names evolve? People in the West were given names based on I should have a 1 based on some physical characteristic. For example, that they might have black hair, so they were called John Black. 2, or yes, or Johnson. 3, or an occupation. For example, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger is Austrian, and his name means black plowman. Yeah, an occupation. A very common occupational name was Smith or Taylor or Schneider, which means tailor, or both of which mean butcher, sorry. Yeah, occupations were big. Schneider, like I said, means tailor. But yeah. In the early Middle Ages and throughout most of the pre-modern era, books were very expensive, and that was a great handicap towards the average person gaining knowledge of any kind of sort. What were medieval books made of? Because they were not made of paper. And in the modern sense, or even the Egyptian sense, or the Chinese sense, books at the time were made of two materials, which you see there. There is parchment, which is sheepskin, or vellum, which is calfskin. Books then were very, very expensive because, you have to sacrifice a cow or a sheep to just to write something. As it says there, books were sports car valuable and were each individually made and copied and recopied by monks, some of whom dedicated their entire lives to reprinting manuscripts as the ink would fade over time. Because they didn't have the indelible ink that we have today, they had ink made from organic materials like berries and those kind of things. These books were also elaborately decorated or illuminated, both on the cover and the pages, and were actually very serious works of art themselves. In Charlemagne's world, life-size sculptures were often deemed as being too paganistic, or idol worshipping, and were practically abandoned. There was an exception to this rule, however, when it came to the field of religious items and relics. Religious items could include things used in the mass services or inside the church itself. A relic, once again, is a literal piece of someone's body, such as the head of John the Baptist, such as the tooth of the Apostle Paul, such as the blood of Christ. Those are relics. The lance that pierced the side of Jesus. And as it says there were enough heads of John the Baptist making the rounds in Europe, some for sale and others just to garner donations for the ignorant and overly pious to populate a small town. There were enough splinters of the Christian cross to build a small town. And then there were enough lance heads that pierced the side of Jesus to have killed that small town. I like that. Compared to Greco-Roman sculptures, however, medieval Carolingian carvers of wood and stone showed little interest in true human anatomy or the realistic approach to space in art. Two-dimensional arts became a hallmark, and so you need to make sure you understand that. The art of the medieval age looked very cartoonish, two-dimensional. It had height, it had width, did not have much of anything else. By the time Charlemagne was crowned by the Pope, his palace at Aachen, also called Alla Capella, reflected his status, as well as copying many of the significant magnificent palaces and churches of Rome and Constantinople. When Charlemagne died, his empire did not decline gradually, rather that quickly splintered among his three sons who were fighting each other. These lands and people will form primarily the large nations of Germany and France. The allies of Louis the German retained the old barbaric German language as their language, while the more western regions of Charles the Bald adopted Latin, which evolved into what today we call French. It is an ironic factor when you consider the wars that ravaged Western Europe on many occasions between these races of Frankish peoples. What was the Treaty of Verdun of 832 AD? That was the treaty where Charlemagne's property was split. Louis the German, of course, took Germany. Charles the Bald took most of what is France. Lothar took the region called Burgundia. The Frankish kingdom split off into further and further subdivisions as the weaker offspring of Charlemagne could not hold on to their inheritance and had to make deals with the local warlords just to stay in power. During the 9th and 10th century as well, Europe came under blistering attacks literally from every direction. The Magyars, they used to be called, the Huns, Attila the Hun, attacked from the east. The Vikings from the north, and the Arab Muslims from the south. I mean, so in Europe, there were always threats from every direction. Probably the worst of which, the most feared, were the Vikings. Um, the Vikings often attacked drunk. I mean, they did not mind killing each other. And certainly they had no compunction, no reservation about. They knew that inside churches there was valuables, there was gold. They also knew that these monks and priests didn't fight back, and so churches and monasteries made easy pickings. And smashing the head of a priest, crushing the skull of a monk, not a problem for them. So yeah, and let's stop there, shall we? Yeah. All right.